Rob's Child here. Welcome to Chapter 19 of Security Analysis. Nothing I say is an investment advice, and I don't intend these videos to replace the contents, but supplement them and open them for discussion. This is Chapter 19, discussing protective covenants continued. So more protective covenants. A few of the main points that I'll go over are the first one, the very first subtitle says prohibition of prior liens. And so I believe that means when you have a lien on a property, you can't put another lien on it that can get paid off before the existing lien, is what I get out of that. So I also learned about the word indenture. I thought that indenture meant like something different than what it is. It's just rules that the company has for involving their debts, and it's usually like a document that says, these are the rules of how this is going to go. One interesting thing that can be in indentures is unsecured debt being made as secure as later debt secured by property. So that gives extra safety to those first bondholders. And then, one other section that I found interesting, the purchase money mortgages being kind of baloney because it gives the impression of more safety when new debt is created to buy new property. But that's not really how it works, because it's all tied together to the same company. The debt of the company is the debt of the company no matter what. I found that to be an interesting point and an important little detail to recognize if it ever comes up. And then there's a discussion, interestingly, about working capital requirements typical of industrial companies. And I think, if I'm not correct, I believe that he's talking about requirements according to the law. Scratch that. I don't think it's the law. I think it's part of the indentures, part of the rules of the capital structure of a company. So the idea being that there are provisions that say they have to have enough working capital, otherwise they're considered to be in default, even if they're able to pay, even if they have the ability to pay off the interest. I think the idea here is that burning cash little by little increases risk, and so they're like, no, you have to have this much in order to, especially in regards to dividends, paying especially dividends to the stockholders. If the company's losing money while paying out dividends, that can be a problem. And so that's a good provision to have for a company in general. I see stocks that have a very long history of paying out very good dividends. This is common, and especially in like food producers and stuff today, where you see, they don't want to drop their reputation of paying out that same dividend, even if they're losing money. And that's that can be disastrous, right? I mean, you're putting the bondholders at higher risk, those provisions are probably a good thing for companies to have and maintain. He says, it was more typical for industrial type companies to have those kinds of rules. We mentioned again regarding the voting. He brings up the voting thing a lot. if a company, he says in here over and over again that it's not typical, this doesn't really happen, but he thinks it should happen, that when a company goes into default, however that's defined even by the provisions of the company, the indentures, that in those cases the voting control should go to the bondholders, even if, again, like we discussed in the last chapter, even if it's not really very meaningful or doesn't change much, at least it's in their hands, and it seems like the right thing to do is his perspective on all of that. So then another suggested provision for investment trust issues. Again, with that, I'm not sure I even know what that is. I think that might mean, yeah, it's a bond. It's just a type of bond, and he says they belong in a special category. A suggested provision of it, very interesting, is when the collateral of the bond drops below a certain price in the market. So let's say you have a building and that's the collateral for these bonds, and the market's going down and the value of the building goes down. There's a rule that says, okay, well then you got to sell it and give us our money back, because you got to protect your bondholders. These people you owe debt to, and if that's what's happening with the collateral. So that's a nice provision to have for a bond, I would think. But in this part of the chapter, he also mentions how bondholders often get the short end of the stick. They don't get a vote, and they don't get much. So, so that was that was a suggested provision that would make sense. I don't know if that has occurred, does occur, but he says it was a suggestion. Then we get into sinking funds. Retiring bonds periodically. And this makes sense, especially for assets that deplete or depreciate. And he talks about mines, for example. Like, I don't know, let's say we have a coal mine and we know there's so much coal. The value of the mine is going down, and so you need debt to correspond with the automatic devaluation of it. And this can refer to the life of a nuclear power plant, for example, or anything that depreciates. And also ships at that time was another thing. They only last so long. It's always desirable, but not always indispensable for these to exist, especially and that's more for everlasting enterprises. If your company seems like it's gonna make money forever. So all right. So and a way to do that is having serial maturities as an alternative. And then same with indentures, defaults are declared when rules are broken regarding if working capital requirements are not met. The biggest last point of this chapter that I got was how he says that protective provisions don't guarantee safety to a bond. Indentures are secondary to an enterprise's success, but they do add safety, and so it's worth insisting on. And that's the big point here, is that you can have as many rules as you want to for the bondholders to feel safe, and so you want those things, but at the end of the day, they don't add complete safety, because you can, if the company goes completely bankrupt, you can lose all your capital anyway. So that's chapter 19 in a nutshell. Hope you enjoyed. Please discuss in the comments below. Rob's Child.